If you are thinking about buying a Celestron NexStar 8 SE, you should probably watch this video first. There are several reasons why the Celestron NexStar 5 SE is better than the 8 SE. You might say that the 8 SE is a more expensive telescope and it's bigger. Well, you just mentioned the first two reasons why the 5-inch is better than the 8-inch scope. Why would you want a smaller telescope? Well, there are several reasons. The NexStar telescopes are high-quality optical instruments that need to be taken care of. You may not have thought about it yet, but you will have to buy a case to carry your new telescope around in. A case for the 8 SE costs around $300, and a case for the 5 SE only costs $140. The smaller telescope is much easier to carry around and to set up. This means you will use it more often. Half the fun of having a telescope is watching the amazement of other people when they look through your telescope. You are much more likely to take a 5-inch scope to your friend's house than an 8-inch scope. And here's the kicker. The views of the planet and the moon will be identical. The maximum recommended power for the 8-inch scope is 480 and the max for the 5-inch is 300. But typically you are limited to less than 300 power due to the sky conditions, unless you live in a desert away from the city lights. The moon and planets are plenty bright with a 5-inch scope. I find that people are even more amazed with the 5-inch scope because they are thinking it is a toy until they look into the eyepiece, and then they are blown away. You have to ask yourself what you want to use your telescope for. The NexStar mount is not good enough for long exposure photography. Anything over half a minute will have streaks in it. It is great for webcam photography where you're taking 10 to 30 pictures per second. I have even taken pictures up to 15 seconds long, and about half of them turned out okay. In spite of what I've said so far, there will be times when the 8 SE is better than the 5 SE. For example, those 15-second exposures with the 5-inch scope could be done in 6 seconds with the 8-inch scope, resulting in fewer bad pictures. If you are just looking through this telescope, not taking any pictures, then you'll be able to enjoy a globular cluster more with the 8-inch scope, because it'll be brighter. Let's summarize what I have said so far. The 5 SE is better than the 8 SE because it is less expensive and smaller. Smaller is better because the carrying case is cheaper, you will use the smaller one more often, and you get the same view of the planets and the moon. Neither telescope can be used for long exposure photography, which is where an 8-inch would be way better than a 5-inch scope. Finally, another reason why the 5 SE is better than the 8 SE is that it comes with a wedge built into the tripod. The NexStar 6 and 8 SE both have the tripod that has no wedge, while the NexStar 4 and 5 SE have a wedge built right into the tripod. This wedge allows you to align the telescope's polar axis with the Earth's axis of rotation. Celestron quit selling the wedge for the 8 SE, so you have to find a used one on eBay for around $150, but they are hard to find. The main reason for having your telescope polar aligned is for astrophotography. I already said that the NexStar mount will only allow for 30-second exposures or less, so let me show you why you still need to be polar aligned when taking such short exposures. Here you see my 15-second exposure pictures of the globular cluster M22. Each frame is only 15 seconds, so that is not long enough to smear the stars. But I took over 40 frames in around 13 minutes. The 13 minutes is long enough to notice the rotation caused by not being polar aligned. If you want to use stacking software to stack all the pictures together to make one extraordinary picture, you will want to be polar aligned. Here is the same globular cluster taken with polar alignment. The rotation is completely gone. Another reason for polar alignment is for making time-lapse movies. You might want to take a picture of Jupiter every 5 minutes for 10 hours and make a movie of Jupiter rotating around once on its axis. Without polar alignment, you would have Jupiter rotating clockwise almost 180 degrees throughout the night. You might start with Jupiter's North Pole at the top of your picture, but it would rotate until the planet was nearly upside down after 10 hours. YouTuber Thunderfoot did make just such a time-lapse movie. He was not polar aligned, so he had to manually take every picture and rotate it in Photoshop. The final time-lapse was a little jerky because it is not possible to get the rotation perfect by hand. Or maybe you want to make a time-lapse movie of the sunrise on a crater of the moon. It would be nice if the movie wasn't rotating. If you're looking to buy a telescope and you have a budget of $1,200, you need to consider that you have to buy a lot of accessories. I already mentioned the $300 case to carry the telescope. Then you will want to buy some nice eyepieces at $65 a pop. A nice webcam for your telescope is around $100. The NexStar telescopes eat up batteries, so you should buy the Celestron power tank for $60. I'm sure the 8-inch scope eats batteries faster than the 5-inch one. The point I am making is that if you have $1,200 in your budget, then you should get the $700 NexStar 5SE and then get all those accessories. If you're like me, you have your eyes on the telescopes that cost thousands more. You're planning on getting something cheaper for now and hoping to get a nicer scope later. Why not get the 5SE now and skip getting the 8SE? It really doesn't offer much more than the 5SE, and it costs way more. I like the 5SE so much I bought 2 of them. Now I realize that I don't need 2, so I'm selling this one on eBay. I will put a link to the auction in the More Info section below. Whenever I buy something on eBay, I always wonder if the seller has thought about how they are going to ship it to me. I often imagine that they wait until I bought and paid for it before they realize they need to get a box and ship it to me. This might take an extra day or more before they get around to it. For this reason, I like to show that I already have the item for sale in a box and ready to ship before the auction even begins.